Hey everyone, it is finally time that we put this little Unimog back together. And let's start out by getting that rolling chassis in here, because there's a few parts that I want to mount both to that and to the cab while it's nice and easy to get to before we go ahead and lift the cab back in place. This thing has not been outside for, I don't know, a year or something. And the second it is outside the door, it is just immediately in the rain and the mud. Danish summer. Well, the steering is a little loose. Well, it only took a few seconds for all of this to be very wet. So let's start over here. Things I want to mount to this before we put it on is the wiper assembly and some of the wiring harness and basically all the stuff that has to be up under here. And also the throttle pedal and the linkage up to the hand throttle. Because all of that stuff is going to be much easier to assemble now rather than when I have the engine taking up all this space. On a lot of the Unimogs that I've seen, this little hump in the plastic here has been either worn down or broken off over time, but it is still present on this one. The point of it is that when your lever is on this side, that is the off position, it's all the way down, and you bring it to the other side of that hump, and that is your idle position, and then you have the hand throttle for the rest of the way. You have the center knob tightened down. This is spring loaded, so you can bring it up over that bump to turn it off, or you can bring it back and you can still give it some manual hand throttle. You just adjust how tight it is with this center knob. So the way the pedal down here is normally connected with the hand throttle up here, originally it is a little thin piece of steel wire with a little hook shape on the end, but it's another one of those things that just always seems to be broken on these types of Unimogs. On all of the ones I've seen, they've had some sort of repair in here, either with electrical wires or zip ties or something like that. Because that original piece, it is kind of flimsy, and for some reason it's also fairly expensive to replace. So I'm not even going to bother with that. I am going to make my own with some steel cable. This is going to be plenty strong. It'll probably be much stronger than the original thing, and it'll work just fine. Now, I know this is not the correct tool for doing this, but I don't have it right here. It doesn't really matter. This is going to work just fine. It's not like we have to hold tons of force with this. Nice. Not really sure how long the cable has to be, so we're just going to leave it plenty long, and we can adjust it later. So, I actually think that was all that I wanted to mount to this for now. I was going to mount some of the wiring harness and stuff up there, but I don't think I'm going to do that because looking at it now, I don't think that's going to be an issue. So that is going to be it. I don't want any more on this because that's just going to be more things getting in the way, and the lighter it is, the easier it's going to be to lift it and maneuver it around. The reason I brought the chassis in here was because I was going to mount my 2 hydraulic lines to the rear, because they are a bit fiddly to get in there in the chassis, and it would be even more fiddly once the cab is in place. But I have been doing a lot of thinking on these lines because honestly they are just not looking very good. They seem to be very thin in some places. So I've decided that I'm not going to use the old lines, which means that I have 2 options. Either I'm going to have to make some new steel lines, which is going to be a bit of a project in itself because I do have to be very accurate with the bends, otherwise it's going to be a bit of a pain to fit them. But the other option is that I completely replace these with just regular hydraulic hoses. And I think that's what I'm going to go with because they are going to turn into a hose up here anyway. So not only is it going to make it much easier to install all of this stuff, it's also going to eliminate some of these connections in the middle of the line. So, having just made up my mind on that, I think we are ready to put the cab back in place. Well, actually, we have to put it in place because not only with the hydraulic lines, but also with my air line and my throttle cable and all that stuff, I really don't know the correct length of all these things until I have the cab back in place and we know where everything is supposed to be. So, let's go ahead and put it on here. No, wait a minute. I have some fuel lines and stuff to tidy up. Okay, I'll get that sorted and then we will put the cab back on here. So I'm not gonna lie, given how long it has taken to get to this point, this part is a little bit nerve-wracking. I now realize that I'm gonna be in my own way. I want that thing turned the other way. Otherwise, I'm not gonna have room for the rest of the Unimog. Huh. Okay. As if it wasn't already difficult enough to do this on my own, the wind has really picked up, so this thing is just swinging all over the place. I'm gonna see if I can control that from inside the cab. It would just be my kind of luck if I blew a hydraulic line right now. I don't even want to think about that. We are almost there, and it's looking really good. Let's see if I can get this up and in place so we don't squish that somehow. Man, it's been a long time since this thing has been on there. That actually went much better than I feared. It is really nice to see it like this again. And much to my delight, everything seems to fit just fine. Especially this floor. Remember, this whole bottom part was non-existent, so I had to make that up just best I could. But we are just clearing the shock absorber and the spring in there. And mind you, this needs a little plate in between here, so it is a little bit tighter than it's supposed to be. It will come up like 1/2 centimeter, so we are good on all of those things. That's really nice to see. Now that just got me thinking, should we go and put the bed on it? I mean, I don't really need it on there right now, but I kind of really want to see that. Yeah, I want to see that. We're putting it on. Let's go. The wind is really doing its best to make these things go the opposite way of what I want. Let's just get some of this stuff on here as well. Would you look at that? Man, it is so nice seeing it back together like this. It feels like such a huge milestone in this project. Now, none of all this stuff is bolted down yet, and there's still a lot of things to do. And it's also getting dark, so let's get this thing back inside. You know, given the condition of my old Ford out there and my relatively low operator skill level, and the fact that I was doing all of this on my own, I'm really quite impressed that I didn't end up mangling this whole thing. But now we have to secure that cab back in place, and then we have hundreds of little things we have to fix up and sort out and make nice before we mount it all back on that. Along with a bunch of loose ends we also have to figure out. Well, this is gonna feel weird no matter what because there's nothing. But this seems about right. Well, I guess the cool thing about doing rust repairs is that you're just never done. Found a few more holes. Nice. So, a quick little note here, because I made a little mistake when I put this heater together, because I failed to take into account that there are two ways that these can be mounted. They have mountings for being out and for being in, and that all depends on the kind of cap they're mounted in and stuff like that. But I thought I was being clever when the original switch was broken, and I just added an extra switch for the high and low speed. Problem is, I mounted that next to the other one, and with this one being a heater that's mounted inwards, that meant that that extra switch was mounted right where this pillar is. So I had to take the whole thing back off and relocate the switch up here. So now they are just sideways switches for on and off and high-low speed. It doesn't make any practical difference, it still works exactly the same way. It's just not looking the way I intended. Alright people, now I'm gonna have a whole bunch of little fiddly work getting all of this wiring back in the right place. And I'm not gonna be filming that because you can't really see what I'm doing up under here anyway. And some parts of this has been taking quite a bit longer than I thought they would, especially that heater. That took a while to get that sorted out. So I think we're gonna end this video here, otherwise it's gonna get way too long. But I honestly was hoping to get the entire interior done in this one, but you know, we can't really get it done anyway because we still have those seats where we have to figure out what we're gonna do with those. I mean, the driver's seat is not too bad, but it's not terribly pretty, and the passenger seat is just completely hopeless. So I'm gonna have to go and do some thinking on that. But it is really nice that we've gotten to this stage of the project where it feels like every step is in the right direction and making this thing more and more complete. So, thank you all for watching along, and I'll see you in the next one.